Next, we have the Northeast. It's panel, electric vehicle charging infrastructure.
We will say what we have to say. If there's questions, we will definitely answer them. We decided to do something a little bit different. There will be some pictures behind us, but honestly, I don't think this topic really lends itself to writing a fact. What we're talking about is electric vehicle charging stations. I know we've heard a lot about electric vehicles over the last few days. Some of us were actually lucky enough to have it mandated by our legislature that we will do certain things by certain times. One of the things that, there's a lot of worry about electric vehicles themselves, but there's a whole other part to that a lot of people don't consider, and that is, how do you fuel them? When we go ahead and buy an internal combustion engine, that answer is already there for us. Tim talked about his fueling in Kansas. We all do it some way or another, but for electric vehicles, you need to install an entirely different infrastructure. Why we thought this was pertinent in the Northeast is the most population-dense region in the country. If we were to divide it to the 4 regions that are represented here, the Northeast has 318 people per square mile. The South is second with 119. The Midwest is 82, and the West is 38. Okay, we also have the smallest area of those 4 regions. We are the absolute smallest, and not by a little bit either. So we already have in our region a pretty massive consumption of power, of electric, and things like that, without even considering vehicles. This is something, when we say we're going to use electric to charge vehicles, there's a lot more to it than, hey, let's throw these things in, let's plug a vehicle in, and charge it. So I guess I'll start off with Maryland. We were actually mandated this year. It was first a Senate bill. It was approved by the House, and then it was written into our administrative law. It's called Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022. And basically, by 2028, we have to have 100% of our passenger vehicles that are state vehicles electric. And by 2033, 100% of our what they call light vehicles have to be electric. Our Department of General Services is actually is to ensure that we have the charging infrastructure. Basically, they're going to figure out where everything's going to go. They're going to pay for it and all of that. To date, they haven't done anything. So we're a little behind on that. There are, for passenger vehicles and obviously for electric vehicles, it's not, hey, by this date it's got to be 100%. There are some milestones. I would detail those, but I believe they're going to change because starting next year, they're going to say 25% have to be electric vehicle purchases. We do not have the infrastructure right now to do that. The infrastructure we do have, and this was kind of stunning to me when I interviewed the people that are actually in charge of it for transportation, it's not for us. It's for the public right now. We have, in my complex, we have 7 charging sites, but it's for the public, not for us. So they did a good job with that. We're near the airport, so I suppose they'll be used. We haven't seen anybody use them yet. We had no say in them being installed. We have no control over the installation, where it went, anything like that. We didn't even pay for it, which I guess is a bonus, but it's not for us. My people at that complex just say to me, it's a net loss of 7 parking spaces. That's how they view it. For our fleet, for the rest of the state of Maryland's fleet, right now there's no funding in place to even start looking for where we're putting charging stations. And like I said, there's no plans either. Kind of a gray area. We have basically legal direction on where we have to go in our administrative law, but currently we're not. It doesn't appear that we're going to actually make it with what they're saying. I hope the intent of the law will allow them to change it. But, at this point, it's kind of a gray area. We're feeling a lot of pressure. We'll deal with whatever we can. We just don't want a situation where we have a ton of electric vehicles that are sitting somewhere, not being charged, not being used, just money tied up with something that's doing nothing. That's pretty much Maryland's experience right now. Hopefully it improves in the next few years. We can get vehicles, but it looks like we won't be able to use them. So we're kind of at an opposite end of a lot of you in the room.
Good morning. All right, I'm with New Jersey. We also have similar legislation. We need 25% of light duty, which wasn't really specified in the legislation, but we went with 8,500 GVWR. So 25% of that by 2025, 100% by 2035. Our commissioner also has oversight over transit and the Turnpike Authority. So she kind of tasked us to get together to kind of have a task force to figure out how we were going to do that. So we started pretty early on meeting with them to figure out what vehicles are covered. And we broke it up into like figuring out the vehicles and figuring out the charging stations. So with the charging stations, we actually got Princeton University to do a study for us to kind of see where we would need to put the chargers and how many we'd need. So we're kind of in a good spot for that. We do know what we need to meet that 2035 requirement. So at our headquarters, we'd need about 66 chargers just for state vehicles. And then there's, in our legislation, you also have to consider charging for the public. So we're looking at increasing that by about 20% for employee charging as well. So right now, we're in a design phase for the make ready, just to make sure the infrastructure is there to install those chargers. And for us, our Department of Environmental Protection is kind of the oversight of all of this and supposed to organize everyone. And they're working on a charging contract to actually purchase the chargers. So we're still a couple years out before we can do that. So right now, we do have PHEVs, those count under the legislation. We have a level 1 charger at our headquarters that can charge 8 vehicles. That takes a really long time. So as a stopgap in between, we purchased 4 solar chargers so that they're solar powered level 2. And we've got 2 at our headquarters and then 1 at each regional headquarters. But those arrived right before we got here, so they haven't even really been updated yet to start working. So that's where we're at.
I'm Amanda from Vermont, and in Vermont, our mandate currently is 75% of light-duty passenger fleet by July of 2021. That has not been achieved. We have some exceptions to that mandate for law enforcement and highway maintenance, luckily. So the only vehicles that we've had to get under this mandate are the ones we lease from the light-duty centralized fleet. We currently are at 46%. We have installed 13 level 2 non-network dual-head chargers statewide so far, but because we don't know where the technology is headed, there is a hesitancy to add more currently. The plug-in hybrids do count for us as well. We have 6 F-150 Lightnings on order, which is big for us for the size of our fleet, and some of those will be take-home vehicles, so there's some negotiation about how we will reimburse employees for the electricity being used at their home. And that's kind of the state of things in Vermont right now.
Hello, LJ Hardy from DelDOT. Pretty much ditto. We have a climate action plan of 20% by 2025. We currently have 2 electric vehicles in our fleet, and right now we're only installing level 1 chargers, and we have about 6 of them across the different office complexes.
Danielle Brooks, I am from Maine DOT. So up here I have some of our chargers. This started back in 2019. Our light fleet division had purchased 5 Nissan Leafs, which sat for a while because we didn't have any mechanisms or infrastructure for charging. So that was disappointing, and DOT decided we were going to put a non-networked charge station inside of our fleet headquarters. So I was personally able to take the first Nissan Leaf and use it for commuting to meetings, and that was a lot of fun. We charged it right there. So with the non-networked, you're not getting anything that you want for data. You have to manually record it. You're not getting reports like you would get with the networked chargers. But they're very inexpensive to install. It costs under $1,000 just for the charger unit, and then we have an electrician and a fuel control crew that would run a 40-amp service and install that. So all in all, it was about $1,500 a piece for the non-networked. And we installed 8 of those across the state. So far, I think ours is the only one that gets any use. We don't have EVs across our state. We have a lot of rural areas, which make it really complicated to have an EV. I realized that when I drove to Bangor, which is about an hour from fleet headquarters, and I made it back with less than 10% of my battery. So that was a one-time trip. I haven't done that again. We started with the non-networked because they were fast and easy to install, and we didn't have to send anything out to bid. It did not exceed the fixed asset threshold. With the networked, those do exceed the fixed asset threshold. So we had to put that out to bid, and it took a while to get a contract in place. So once we did get the contract, it was around 2020, we were able to start ordering those. We now have 8 installed across the state, and with the networked, those are available to the public. The non-networked are within our facilities. We are not opening those to the public, and we're not charging our customers for use. The facilities pay for those electrical costs. But with the networked, we do have a mechanism, and we're charging 12 cents per kilowatt hour, which is in alignment with a few of the other EV charge stations that the state owns. We have 8 currently, 1 at our DOT headquarters, which probably gets the most use, and after that, we did install 1 at our Rockland Ferry Terminal, which does get quite a bit of use. Most of them are pedestal units with 2 ports. So the one at the top here is at our DOT headquarters. The one in the bottom right is at our fleet headquarters. That was the first one that went in. The one in the middle is at our Rockland Ferry Terminal. That one was a wall-mounted unit, but they had to make some modifications and pull it out so that it was ADA compliant. The ones in the lower left are the non-networked units. They can be indoors or outdoors. So the one on the far left is outdoors, and that one in the middle is the one that we have at fleet headquarters. Now, the networked ones are a lot more expensive, which is also a deterrent if you're not really committed to EVs. So fortunately, we had the VW settlement money that we used to purchase the networked units, because with the charger, along with all of the groundwork you have to do and running electrical lines, depending on where you want to put it, the further away you are from electrical source, it's going to be more expensive. We did our own groundwork. We poured our own cement pads. Our crew did all of it. So those ran from between 12 to 18,000. And the majority of those costs were covered from the VW settlement money. Now, that expired in October 21, so I'm not sure what the state wants to do for funding going forward, but that's what we have installed. We do have 2 additional units that we're in the process of installing. After that, the department has talked about putting in level 3 chargers at the rest areas. And we have our first electric hybrid ferry, so that's exciting. We don't have a lot of EVs in the fleet right now. I know that our light fleet division is trying to get more, and the state is offering rebates, which actually make it more beneficial and cost less than the gas-powered equivalents. However, they're also having trouble sourcing the EVs, so we'll see what they do with that. But it's just starting out, but we do have a lot of mandates. We have a climate council. Our chief engineer is on the climate council, so that has really pushed us into building the infrastructure across the state. These are the locations. So on the left, those are all the EV charge stations in our state that are available for public, not all DOT owned. The ones on the right are the ones that are DOT owned. You'll see the circles. If it says 2, it just means there's 2 ports on one charger. There are a couple locations that say 4 because we have 2 chargers there with 2 ports each.
So as you can see, the Northeast has a variety of different places we're in as far as EV charging. Some of the states, like mine, and I know Pennsylvania, I had a conversation with Mike before he left, plus he's our neighbor. We're kind of in the same boat with all of that. Maine has taken the ball and run with it as far as the Northeast goes. But what you're looking at is there's a lot of feel-good up front about electric vehicles, and I, for one, believe there is a place. They have an answer to a question. I don't believe that any one technology is the answer for all questions. That's why we run multiple fuels in our fleet, and we have multiple prime movers in our fleet, is because it's just, you can't work it out to one answer. I think that the conversations that we've had and the conversations I've had over the last few days, we're looking at something where people that don't have to live in the reality of the questions they're answering feel really good about this, and they should. I mean, like I said, the technology does have a place. The technology is very effective when it's in those places, but we also have to look at the reality of, you want us to do this, we're going to need the resources to take care of it. Electric vehicles are more expensive, but as far as installing all of the necessary systems, whether that be, DC fast charge, a fast charge catenary system for our fleets, whether we're allowed to install those in certain areas because of the demand of the electric, whether it's actually physically feasible to do that because of the power structure you have there, the actual utility structure you have there, and the actual cost of all of this going on is going to be an eye-opener. Like I said, our Department of General Services really hasn't looked too deeply into it. I have, just because I know that the thumb is going to be put on us sooner or later. And just for my facilities, 29 facilities, if we were to do a quarter of it electric, we're already into the hundreds of millions of dollars to get it done. Money we don't have right now for that or has not been allocated. And the timing as well. It's not, you don't drop these things in, you know. Danielle put it very succinctly. You modify your areas, you modify your utilities, you run lines, you pour cement, you do a lot of different things. That's not something that we do overnight. And if we're not doing it ourselves, I don't know if you've ever worked with contracting at that level, that's not an easy thing. More to be continued. I'm sure this will be a conversation that gets rehashed, updated over the years as we meet, as more people, more states are required to do this by law. And we'll see where everything takes us. But for right now, we're at the beginning of it, and it's kind of an uncomfortable spot to be in if you're actually being pointed at and saying and being told, you got to do this by this time. When you really realize that you can't get there from here right now. So there we have it. Is there any questions or observations? Does anybody have you doing something?
For Danielle, the far right, you mentioned you had ferries. How many boats do you guys have? Or electric, I guess I should say.
One.
Did you guys write a spec for that, and if so, is it on the EMTSP, or if not, can you share?
Yes, I'm sure they have something put together. I don't even know if it's operational yet. I know they've put it together. I've learned how much it costs. I don't want to state that.
In Virginia, we have a few, so when you said that, it was something that interesting that you guys have that, and I'd just be interested in somehow getting that spec to kind of see if that's the way we decide to go or not.
I'm just curious, with everything going on, has any of the states done or have available a detailed impact statement from A to the ultimate end of the costs, estimated cost for doing this? That includes infrastructure, that includes purchasing, that includes maintenance. I know, and we've been down that road before with different technologies and laws that we're forced to have, but it seems to me that there's so much going on, yet we still don't have a relatively good impact statement to show somebody, you put this on us, but this is what's going to be. This is the reality. Does anybody have anything like that yet?
Dick, from a quick look, no. A lot of us, I know at least where I work, have asked for things like that. We're always curious about what stuff's going to cost before we run headlong into it. And even talking with you, a lot of us have been kicking around the EV thing and making comparisons to the old CNG mandate or the LNG mandate and that type of infrastructure. That we still have a CNG fueling station over at our largest airport that is not used. There are no more of the vehicles around that use it. But, it didn't fall out of the sky fully operational, and it was not free. It took a lot of money and time to build that. But I know with my organization, we do have people that work for our facilities group that are trying to push something together. If they get something, I will definitely send it to be put on the website as a very back-of-the-envelope type of cost estimation. That's where I'm getting the hundreds of millions from, is because they're just looking and with their understanding and knowledge of facilities and how things work and the contracting that's required, and even dealing with our utility companies. They threw the one number out there like it's in the hundreds, and we'll figure out, we'll draw a better beat on it, and we will let you know which ones where it's just a hard no. It's not happening here. Like I said, more to come when we start feeling the pinch. I think we'll start getting very studious.
I was just going to make a general statement. We're same boat, kind of, and in some ways I think we should get together and participate in some conference calls and some Teams meetings. And we don't have any silver bullets either, but it would be more of us leaning into the effort. So I'd like to make sure we get contact cards and reach out to you guys. But on the line of the cost estimates and stuff, we're running into the same stuff you guys mentioned. Yeah, you can get the price of a charger. Yeah, you can get the price of installation in most cases. But almost all of our facilities don't have the electrical capacity for the type of installation that the chargers are going to require. And you cannot put a number on that. So that's where we're really running into challenges. Our Department of Administrative Services as well has effort going on to try and put in chargers and installations, but from a DOT perspective, we are tasked with installing enough chargers for our fleet. So we have the fleet mandates to do that, and we're the ones that are responsible for that. So we've been able to analyze some of our light fleet fueling data. Where do they fuel liquid fuel now? And that's helping us identify some of the locations we're going to target for EV installations and charger installations, just one at a time.
That's the absolute difficulty of this. One of the things is that for DC fast charge, the most efficient power structure is 463 phase. One, you can't get that's against the law in Maryland for residential. Okay, you do 463 phase into a building, it now is a commercial property. But for us, a quick analysis of our locations, only half of them have that type of power available. Again, all of your sites probably are as well hardened, which means they have backup generator power. Guess what has to be bigger if we're going to do this?
This is Henry. I just wanted to ask a question. I heard Melissa comment that they had done basically what I'd call a demand study to look at what kind of applications will lended itself to being phasing out the EV rollout. I was curious to see whether anyone else in that group maybe has done something similar, or anyone else in the room, because that typically is sort of one of the early stages of this planning.
For further clarity, Henry, you mean where an electric vehicle would be appropriate, an appropriate task or profession where it would be?
Exactly. It's application planning. It's sort of, you typically look at the origin destinations of the vehicles, the application, and you develop a rollout plan, which is in turn the sort of the, then you turn around and figure out where you need chargers, and then you turn around and figure out what other things, or that's sort of like a phased approach. And it sounds like Melissa had, Rutgers or somebody do something for that?
Yeah, Princeton University did. If they pretty much call it the framework that they are going to base further plans on. But initially they kind of decided on having charging in like destination areas, like office buildings where someone's going to be parked for a period of time anyway. So that's the basics for where they kind of went with that.
I was just going to add, I know at least some folks in the room in January at the TRB, there was a presentation from Suffolk County, New York, came in and presented, and they had frankly, I would never been on site to see if exactly they're walking the talk, but they had a very good plan, a very well thought out plan that should be available. The presentation and the documentation might be a good resource you folks might want to look at to give you some insights into how a pretty large county, that's basically the Long Island, New York, is approaching this thing. And they did the whole planning about, you guys were talking, they were going to have to pull substations in because their building simply couldn't support it. They were going to actually even have to do some microgrid generation to meet some of the emergency response needs and so on. So anyway, that's a resource you may want to consider.
This is Dan from DOT, Maine DOT. We also purchase transit buses. That's one of our other projects we do, amongst all the DOT stuff. But what the transit side is doing, they have contracted a contractor to do a feasibility study on these buses, where it makes sense to put them. Like you said, we're such a rural area that it doesn't make sense to put them in certain areas. And the other thing they're doing is working with the power companies to see if their grid lines are even feasible to accept these chargers. So there is some on like I said, using federal money, there is some feasibility study going on. That's what they're doing on the bus side.
So I'm curious about two pieces. You're allowing the public to charge, and I think Maine said you're charging 12 cents a kilowatt hour. Are the rest of you charging the public to use your chargers?
Yes, actually, and this is something that the federal government has recently addressed. With ours, I don't know if you're familiar with the electric scooters that are available in urban areas that you can quote-unquote rent for the day. There's also an app just like that you can download. I've looked at the actual head of our chargers. You download an app, and it's done through your phone. You have to associate a credit card with it. I didn't see on there a rate, and the people whom were in my organization, I asked, do you know what the rate is for that? They said, no, you'd have to contact that company. I just didn't get a chance before we came here to actually see what the cost was, but I'm sure it's more than the cost of electric.
Yeah. So who gets the money? Does it come back to Fleet?
No, they're not, okay, for Maryland, we don't own it, we don't maintain it, we don't do anything with it. It's it's just on our property.
Gotcha.
So, well, actually, I take that back. In the winter, we will clear the snow off that area so people can park and use it. But everything else, we don't see anything. We didn't even pay for it.
So you're paying just like the public user is to use their charger?
Well, these are specifically targeted towards public use, not for state
Gotcha.
vehicle use. Somebody would have to associate their personal credit card with it to charge a state vehicle, and that's not happening.
Yeah. The other piece was, what about demand charges? Are you guys seeing demand charges from the utilities, and are they significant?
We've had some conversations about getting a Class 8 tractor truck to pull our brine tanks around, and in our conversations with the power company, because their infrastructure can't support it, they have told us that yes, they will charge us more for the power that a level 3 charger uses.
I just wanted to speak on the billing structure that we have, because we're an internal service fund, so our goal is to break even at the end. So what we do is we take what we are paying for electrical costs, and then we go through ChargePoint. So ChargePoint will take the customer's credit card, they'll bill them whatever rate we put in there. They'll pay us back for the electricity, plus less a 10% charge. So our rates are set in a way that we are capturing and collecting for that 10% amount that ChargePoint is charging.
All right, thank you, Northeast. Lunchtime?
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.